Sarah Mitchell sat alone in the back corner of the Anchor Bay diner, her coffee growing cold as she stared out the rain-streaked window. The small coastal town of Anchor Bay, Virginia, had been her refuge for the past 6 months, a quiet place where she hoped to find some semblance of peace after everything she had been through. At 34 years old, Sarah carried herself with a quiet strength that came from years of discipline and sacrifice. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a plain gray sweatshirt that hung loose on her lean frame. To anyone passing by, she looked like just another local trying to escape the November chill with a hot cup of coffee. But Sarah was far from ordinary. The bell above the diner door chimed, and Sarah glanced up out of habit. 2 men in their 50s walked in, both wearing navy baseball caps and leather jackets covered in patches. They carried themselves with the unmistakable swagger of men who wanted everyone to know about their service. Sarah recognized the type immediately, veterans who made their military experience the cornerstone of their identity, displaying it loudly and proudly wherever they went. She looked back down at her coffee, hopping to avoid any interaction. In the months since settling in Anchor Bay, Sarah had learned that keeping to herself was the best policy. The fewer questions people asked, the better. "That'll be $8.50, the waitress said to the 2 men as they ordered breakfast at the counter. "Make it 10 and keep the change, sweetheart," the taller one said with a wide grin. "Name's Rick Donovan. Me and my buddy Pete here were retired Navy, submarine service, 20 years each." The waitress smiled politely and thanked them. Sarah noticed how Rick's chest seemed to puff out just a little bit more as he said the words Navy and 20 years. She had seen it countless times before, good men who had served honorably, but who perhaps felt the need to announce it a bit too often. Rick and Pete took their coffee and settled into a booth near the window, not far from where Sarah sat. She tried to focus on the newspaper in front of her, but their voices carried easily across the small diner. "This town's changed," Rick said, shaking his head. "Used to be you knew everyone. Now there's all these new faces, people moving in from who knows where." "Tell me about it," Pete agreed. "And half of them probably never served a day in their lives. No appreciation for what we did, what we sacrificed." Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She knew where conversations like this often led. The resentment, the feeling of being underappreciated, the suspicion toward outsiders. It was a pattern she had witnessed too many times. She was about to ask for her check when Rick's voice rose slightly. "Hey, you see that woman over there, the one in the corner?" Sarah's stomach dropped. She kept her eyes on the newspaper, pretending not to hear. "What about her?" Pete asked. "I saw her at the Veterans Day ceremony last week. She was wearing a Navy SEAL t-shirt, had the trident right on the front, big as day." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. She remembered that day. It had been a moment of weakness, a day when the weight of her secrets felt too heavy. She had worn the shirt without thinking, driven by a need to feel connected to the part of her life she had been forced to leave behind. "So," Pete said, "lots of people wear military shirts, doesn't mean anything." "That's exactly my point," Rick said, his voice hardening. "People wearing stuff they didn't earn, stolen valor. It's an insult to everyone who actually served." "You think she's a fake?" Pete asked, interest creeping into his voice. "I know she is," Rick said firmly. "There's never been a woman Navy SEAL. Not one. It's a fact. So either she's lying or she's wearing that shirt to pretend to be something she's not. Either way, it's wrong." Sarah felt her hands trembling slightly. She carefully folded the newspaper and reached for her wallet. All she wanted was to leave quietly, to slip out before this escalated into something worse. But as she stood and walked toward the counter to pay, Rick's voice stopped her. "Excuse me, miss." Sarah paused, every muscle in her body tensing. She turned slowly to face him, keeping her expression neutral. "Yes," she said quietly. Rick stood up, walking toward her with Pete following close behind. Up close, Sarah could see the challenge in his eyes, the certainty that he had caught someone in a lie. "I saw you at the Veterans Day ceremony," Rick said. "You were wearing a SEAL shirt, the trident." "I was," Sarah acknowledged, her voice calm despite the racing of her heart. "That's stolen valor," Rick said flatly. "There's never been a female Navy SEAL. You're disrespecting everyone who actually earned that trident." The diner had gone quiet. The waitress stood frozen behind the counter, and the few other customers watched the confrontation unfold. Sarah felt the weight of their stares, the judgment already forming in their minds. "I'm not disrespecting anyone," Sarah said evenly. "I have every right to wear that shirt." Rick's face reddened. "Is that so? You're telling me you're a Navy SEAL?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. She had faced down enemy combatants in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. She had made split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. She would not be intimidated in a small-town diner by a man who knew nothing about her. "I'm telling you," she said carefully, "that you don't know anything about me or what I've done." "I know enough," Rick shot back. "I know there's no such thing as a female SEAL. I know that you're either lying or confused. And I know that people like you, people who pretend to be something they're not, make me sick." Pete put a hand on Rick's shoulder. "Easy, buddy. Maybe we're jumping to conclusions here." But Rick shrugged him off. "No, I'm tired of seeing this. Tired of people wearing uniforms and badges they didn't earn. My son is active duty Navy. He works his tail off every single day. And then someone like her comes along and wants to play dress-up with a SEAL shirt." Sarah felt something shift inside her. For months, she had kept silent, had hidden who she was and what she had done. She had accepted the isolation, the loneliness, the constant need to watch her words. All because she had been ordered to disappear, to become invisible while the powers that be decided what to do with someone like her. But standing in that diner, facing a man who was so certain of his righteousness, so convinced that he knew the truth, Sarah felt her carefully maintained composure begin to crack. "You're making assumptions," she said, her voice still controlled but carrying an edge now. "Dangerous assumptions." "The only dangerous thing here is you lying about your service," Rick countered. He pulled out his phone. "You know what? I'm calling the police. Let them sort this out. There are laws against stolen valor. You can explain to them why you think it's okay to pretend to be a Navy SEAL." Sarah felt trapped. If the police came, if they started asking questions, running background checks, her carefully constructed new life would unravel. The people who had told her to stay hidden, to keep quiet, would not be happy. And more importantly, the truth about her service, about the missions she had run, could not become public. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "That's not necessary," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm. "I'll leave. There's no need to involve the police." But Rick was already dialing, his expression triumphant. "Oh no, you don't get to just walk away from this. You insulted every real veteran in this town. You're going to face the consequences." Sarah stood there, her mind racing through options. She could leave right now, walk out the door and disappear before the police arrived. She had done it before, slipping away from situations when staying would have meant exposure. But something held her in place. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was exhaustion from running. Maybe it was just the sheer unfairness of being accused by someone who had no idea what she had sacrificed. The waitress finally found her voice. "Rick, maybe you should calm down. Let the lady explain herself." "Explain what?" Rick demanded. "That she bought a Navy SEAL shirt at the surplus store and thought nobody would call her out on it." "I earned everything I've ever worn," Sarah said quietly, her hands clenched at her sides. "You have no right to judge me." "I have every right," Rick shot back. "I served my country, I know what real service looks like, and I know a fake when I see one." Within 10 minutes, a police cruiser pulled up outside the diner. Officer Tom Bradley stepped out, a veteran himself who had served in the Army before joining the Anchor Bay police force. He was in his early 40s. With graying hair and a weathered face that suggested he had seen his share of trouble. He walked into the diner, taking in the scene quickly. Rick immediately approached him. "Tom, thank God you're here," Rick said. "This woman is committing stolen valor. She's been wearing Navy SEAL gear around town, pretending to be something she's not." Officer Bradley looked at Sarah, his expression neutral. "Ma'am, is this true? Have you been representing yourself as a Navy SEAL?" Sarah met his gaze. I wore a t-shirt with a trident on it. That's what this is about. It's not just about a shirt, Rick interjected. It's about honor. It's about respect for the people who actually earned the right to wear that symbol. Bradley held up a hand. Rick, let me handle this. He turned back to Sarah. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification. Sarah hesitated. Her driver's license would show her real name, her real address from before. It could lead to questions she couldn't answer. Not here, not now. I'd prefer not to get the police involved in this, Sarah said carefully. This is just a misunderstanding. Bradley's expression shifted slightly, becoming more official. Ma'am, if you're refusing to provide identification, that's going to be a problem. Mr. Donovan here has filed a complaint about stolen valor. I need to at least get your basic information. Sarah felt the walls closing in. She could see the other people in the diner watching, their faces a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Some probably believed Rick. Some might have their doubts. But none of them would understand the truth, even if she could tell it. She reached slowly for her wallet, pulling out her driver's license and handing it to Officer Bradley. He looked at it, his brow furrowing slightly. Sarah Mitchell, he read aloud, from Virginia Beach. That's right, Sarah confirmed. What brings you to Anchor Bay? Bradley asked. I needed a quiet place to live, Sarah said simply. That's all. Rick stepped closer. Ask her about her military service. Ask her if she's really a Navy SEAL. Bradley glanced at Rick with a touch of annoyance. I'm conducting this investigation, Rick. He looked back at Sarah. Ma'am, have you been claiming to be a Navy SEAL? I haven't claimed anything to anyone, Sarah said. I've kept to myself since I arrived here. But you wore the shirt, Rick pressed. You wore it to a Veterans Day ceremony. That's a claim right there. Bradley seemed to consider this. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come down to the station. We need to sort this out properly. Sarah's heart sank. This was exactly what she had been trying to avoid, but she could see no way out that wouldn't make things worse. Am I under arrest? She asked quietly. Not at this time, Bradley said. But I need to verify your story, check your background. Mr. Donovan has made a serious allegation. I have to follow up on it. Sarah nodded slowly. She knew that once they started checking her background, they would find things that didn't add up. They would find gaps in her history, inconsistencies that couldn't be easily explained. And then the questions would really begin. As Officer Bradley led her toward the door, Sarah caught the satisfied look on Rick Donovan's face. He believed he had caught a liar, exposed a fraud. He had no idea what he had actually done, what chain of events he had just set in motion. The rain had picked up, falling in heavy sheets as Sarah climbed into the back of the police cruiser. Through the window, she could see the faces in the diner, all of them watching. She had come to Anchor Bay to disappear, to find peace after years of war. Instead, she had found something far more complicated. As the cruiser pulled away from the diner, Sarah closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for what was coming. The truth would come out eventually. It always did. The only question was how much damage it would cause along the way, and whether anyone would believe it when it finally emerged from the shadows where it had been hidden for so long. Part 2. The Investigation. The Anchor Bay Police Station was a small, two-story brick building that sat on Main Street, across from the town's modest library. Officer Tom Bradley led Sarah through the front entrance, past the dispatcher's desk, and into a plain interview room. The space was exactly what she expected. Gray walls, a metal table, 2 chairs, and a mirror that was almost certainly two-way glass. Have a seat, Ms. Mitchell, Bradley said, his tone professional but not unkind. Can I get you some water or coffee? Water would be fine, thank you, Sarah replied, settling into the chair. She kept her posture relaxed, her hands visible on the table. Years of training had taught her how to appear calm even when her mind was racing through scenarios and contingencies. Bradley left the room briefly and returned with a bottle of water, which he set in front of her. He sat down across the table, pulling out a notepad. Look, he began, his voice softer now that they were away from Rick Donovan's anger. I'm a veteran myself. Army, 2 tour in Iraq. I understand how passionate people get about military service and the symbols that represent it. But I also understand that situations aren't always as simple as they seem. Sarah nodded, but said nothing. She had learned long ago that the less she volunteered, the better. Rick Donovan can be a hothead, Bradley continued. But he's not wrong about one thing. Stolen valor is a real problem, and it does insult the people who served. So I need to ask you directly, have you been representing yourself as a Navy SEAL? No, Sarah said firmly. I've never told anyone in this town that I was a SEAL. But you wore the shirt, Bradley pointed out. To a Veterans Day ceremony of all places, you had to know people would notice. You had to know what conclusions they might draw. Sarah took a sip of water, buying herself a moment to think. I wore a shirt, that's all. I didn't make any announcements. I didn't claim any service I didn't perform. Bradley studied her carefully. Ms. Mitchell, I ran your license through our system while we were driving over here. Your record is clean, not even a parking ticket. But when I tried to pull up more detailed information, I hit some walls. Your employment history is spotty. Your previous addresses don't all check out. And when I tried to access military records, he paused, watching her reaction. Let's just say I got a message I've never seen before. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but her pulse quickened. This was what she had feared. The protections that had been put in place, the classifications that shrouded her service, they were designed to keep people from finding the truth. But they also raised red flags when someone went looking. What kind of message? Sarah asked, though she already knew. It said access was restricted and that any inquiries should be directed to the Department of Defense, with a specific code I've never encountered in 15 years of law enforcement, Bradley said. He leaned forward slightly. Now, I'm just a small-town cop, but I know what that usually means. It means someone's got secrets. Someone's got a history they don't want casual observers to know about. Sarah remained silent. This was the critical moment. She could stonewall, refuse to answer, demand a lawyer. Or she could try to give him just enough to satisfy his curiosity without revealing the whole truth. I served my country, Sarah said carefully. I did things I'm not allowed to talk about. When I left, I was advised to keep a low profile. That's all I can tell you. Bradley sat back, rubbing his jaw thoughtfully. That's not going to be enough, Ms. Mitchell. Rick Donovan is already out there telling everyone who will listen that he caught someone faking military service. By tonight, half the town will know about this. And when they hear that the police had to get involved, they're going to want answers. I can't give you answers I'm not authorized to give, Sarah said quietly. Before Bradley could respond, there was a knock on the door. Another officer poked his head in, a younger man Sarah had seen at the front desk. Tom, sorry to interrupt, but you've got a call on line 2. The guy says it's urgent. Something about your current case. Bradley frowned. Who is it? He didn't give a name. Just said he's calling from the Pentagon, and he needs to speak with you immediately about Sarah Mitchell. Sarah's stomach tightened. The walls were closing in faster than she had anticipated. Someone had been monitoring her, watching for any problems. The moment Officer Bradley had tried to access her records, alarm bells must have gone off somewhere in the military bureaucracy. Bradley looked at Sarah with renewed interest. The Pentagon, that was fast. He stood up. Don't go anywhere, Ms. Mitchell. I'll be right back. He left the room. And Sarah found herself alone with her thoughts. She stood and walked to the small window that looked out over the parking lot. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the gray afternoon light made everything look washed out and tired. She thought about the path that had led her here. The years of training, pushing herself beyond every limit. The missions in places whose names she could never speak. The brothers she had fought beside, bled beside, lost along the way. And then the injury that had ended it all, the explosion that had torn through her team and left her as one of the few survivors. The door opened again, and Bradley returned. His entire demeanor had changed. Gone was the casual small-town cop. In his place was someone who looked genuinely unsettled. That was quite a phone call, he said, sitting down across from her again. The person I spoke to wouldn't give me their name, but they had credentials that checked out. They told me that you are who you say you are, that your service is classified, and that I need to release you immediately." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and resignation. Relief that she wouldn't be stuck in this interview room, answering impossible questions. Resignation because she knew what this meant. Her quiet life in Anchor Bay was over. The moment the Pentagon got involved, the moment calls started being made, her cover was blown. "However," Bradley continued, "they also said something else. They said that if I had any doubts, if I needed verification beyond their word, I should contact Rear Admiral James Whittaker at Naval Special Warfare Command. They gave me a direct number." Sarah's breath caught. Admiral Whittaker. She hadn't heard that name in over a year, not since her medical discharge. He had been her commanding officer, the man who had approved her for the program, who had vouched for her when others doubted. He had also been the one to tell her that her service would have to remain secret, that the world wasn't ready for the truth about who and what she had been. "Did you call the number?" Sarah asked quietly. "Not yet," Bradley said. "I wanted to talk to you first. Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to be straight with you. I don't like being kept in the dark. I don't like having federal agencies telling me how to do my job in my own town. But I'm also not stupid. I know when something is bigger than me." He paused, studying her face. "Rick Donovan is wrong about you, isn't he? You're not faking anything. You really did serve. You really did earn that trident." Sarah met his gaze. After months of hiding, of denying, of keeping silent, the temptation to simply tell the truth was almost overwhelming. But she couldn't, not without authorization, not without knowing what the consequences would be. "I can't answer that question," she said softly. "I'm sorry." Bradley nodded slowly. "I'm going to make that call to Admiral Whittaker, not because I don't believe you, but because I need to know how to handle this situation. Rick Donovan isn't going to let this go. He's probably already posted about this on social media. The story is going to spread. If you really did serve in the capacity I think you did, then people deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know they were wrong about you." "No," Sarah said sharply, leaning forward. "They don't. Nobody deserves to know anything about what I did or where I did it. That information is classified for a reason. It protects me. It protects the people I served with, and it protects operations that might still be ongoing." "Then what do you want me to do?" Bradley asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "Just let Rick and his friends call you a liar. Let them trash your reputation based on their assumptions." "I don't care about my reputation," Sarah said, and she meant it. "I came here to be left alone. I came here to find some peace. If that means people think I'm a liar or a fake, then so be it. I've been called worse things by people who mattered a lot more." Bradley stood up, packing the small room. "You know what? I'm calling the Admiral anyway, because this isn't just about you anymore. This is about my town, my community. If I let you walk out of here with Rick Donovan thinking he was right, it's going to cause problems. He's going to feel empowered. He's going to start suspecting every veteran he doesn't recognize, questioning everyone who wears military gear. That's not the kind of atmosphere I want in Anchor Bay." Before Sarah could respond, Bradley left the room again. She sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of inevitability settle over her. The Admiral would either confirm her service or he wouldn't. Either way, her time in Anchor Bay was finished. 20 minutes later, Bradley returned. His face was pale, and his hands were actually shaking slightly as he sat down. "I just had the most incredible conversation of my life," he said quietly. "Admiral Whittaker confirmed everything, more than confirmed it. He told me things that—" He trailed off, shaking his head in disbelief. "Ms. Mitchell, I owe you an apology. We all do." "You don't owe me anything," Sarah said. "You were doing your job." "The Admiral wants to speak with you," Bradley said, sliding his phone across the table. "He's still on the line." Sarah picked up the phone, her hand steady despite the emotions churning inside her. "Admiral," she said simply. "Sarah," Admiral Whittaker's voice was exactly as she remembered it, deep, authoritative, but with an undercurrent of warmth for people he trusted. "I heard you've gotten yourself into a situation." "It wasn't intentional, sir," Sarah replied. "It never is," Whittaker said. "Listen to me carefully. I've been having conversations with people at the Pentagon, people who make decisions about things like your service record and its classification. What happened today has forced their hand. They can't keep you in the shadows anymore, not if local law enforcement is going to start asking questions and making calls. Sir, I don't want. I know what you want, Sarah, Whitaker interrupted gently. You want to be left alone. You want to live a quiet life and try to forget the things you've seen and done. But that's not going to happen, not after today. So here's what's going to happen instead. I'm flying out there personally. I should arrive tomorrow afternoon. We're going to set the record straight, but we're going to do it the right way, with the right people present. Admiral, that's not necessary, Sarah protested. I can just leave. I can disappear again. No more running, Commander, Whitaker said, using her old rank. No more hiding. You earned the right to walk with your head held high. You earned the right to wear that trident. And by God, you're going to get the respect you deserve, even if I have to come out there and make it happen myself. Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. Sir, I don't need. This isn't about what you need, Sarah. This is about what's right. I'll see you tomorrow. In the meantime, Officer Bradley is going to make sure you're treated with the courtesy befitting your service. Is that clear, officer? Crystal clear, sir, Bradley said, though Sarah could hear the tremor in his voice. Good, Whitaker said. Sarah, stay strong. This is going to get complicated before it gets better, but I promise you we're going to make it right. The line went dead. Sarah handed the phone back to Bradley, who looked at her with something approaching awe. Commander, he said quietly. He called you Commander. Sarah didn't respond. She simply stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the rain-soaked parking lot, wondering what tomorrow would bring and whether the truth, after being buried for so long, would set her free or simply create new chains. Part 3. The Admiral arrives. News spread through Anchor Bay like wildfire. By that evening, everyone in town seemed to know that Sarah Mitchell had been questioned by the police about stolen Valor. Rick Donovan, true to Officer Bradley's prediction, had posted about the incident on social media, painting himself as a patriot who had exposed a fraud. Sarah spent the night in the small efficiency apartment she had rented when she first arrived in town. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat by the window, watching the occasional car pass by on the quiet street below, and thought about all the decisions that had led her to this moment. She had grown up in a military family. Her father had been a Marine, her grandfather Navy. Service was woven into the fabric of her identity from childhood, but Sarah had wanted more than the traditional roles available to women in the military. She had wanted to push boundaries, to test herself against the hardest challenges the armed forces could offer. The path to becoming a Navy SEAL had been brutal. It wasn't supposed to be possible. Women weren't officially allowed in the program. But Sarah had been part of a classified pilot program, one that tested whether female operators could meet the same impossible standards as their male counterparts. Out of 12 women who started, only Sarah and one other had made it through. And in the years that followed, Sarah had proven herself on mission after mission, earning the respect of her teammates through blood, sweat, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Then came the mission in Yemen, the explosion, the casualties, the injury that had shattered her leg and ended her career in active combat operations. The Navy had offered her desk jobs, training positions, roles where she could continue to serve. But Sarah couldn't imagine sitting behind a desk after years in the field. So she had taken her discharge, her commendations safely locked away in classified files, and tried to build a civilian life. It hadn't been easy. The transition never was for people like her. But she had found some measure of peace in Anchor Bay, or at least she had convinced herself she had. Now, as dawn broke over the small coastal town, Sarah wondered if she would ever find peace anywhere. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Officer Bradley called her cell phone. Ms. Mitchell, or should I say Commander Mitchell? He sounded nervous. The Admiral's plane landed an hour ago. He's asked that you meet him at the station at 1100 hours. He's also requested that several town officials be present, including Rick Donovan. Sarah's stomach tightened. Rick Donovan, why? The Admiral was very specific, Bradley said. He said that everyone involved in this situation needs to hear the truth at the same time. He doesn't want there to be any room for doubt or conspiracy theories after he leaves. Sarah understood the logic, even if she didn't like it. "I'll be there." She arrived at the police station at 10:45, wanting to be early rather than risk being late. The parking lot was more crowded than usual. She recognized several cars belonging to town council members, and there was a dark sedan with government plates that she assumed belonged to Admiral Whittaker. Inside, the station was buzzing with quiet activity. Several people Sarah didn't recognize stood in the hallway, all of them wearing suits and the kind of earpieces that marked them as security personnel. Officer Bradley met her at the entrance. "This way," he said quietly, leading her down the hall to the station's small conference room. The conference room had been set up with chairs arranged in rows, like a classroom. At the front of the room stood a man Sarah would have recognized anywhere, Rear Admiral James Whittaker. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair cut military short and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He wore his dress uniform, the ribbons on his chest a testament to a career spent in the most dangerous corners of the world. When he saw Sarah, his stern expression softened slightly. "Commander Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. "It's good to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." "Sir," Sarah replied, shaking his hand firmly, "you didn't have to come all this way." "Yes, I did," Whittaker said simply. "Now let's get everyone assembled. We have quite a bit to discuss." Over the next few minutes, people filed into the room. Sarah recognized the mayor of Anchor Bay, a woman in her 50s named Patricia Henderson. The chief of police was there, along with Officer Bradley. Several town council members took seats near the back, and finally, looking defiant and suspicious, Rick Donovan entered, followed by his friend Pete. Rick's eyes found Sarah immediately, and she could see the challenge in them. He still believed he was right, that she was a fraud who was about to be exposed in front of the whole town. When everyone was seated, Admiral Whittaker closed the door and stood at the front of the room. His presence seemed to fill the space, commanding attention without him having to say a word. "Good morning," he began. "I'm Rear Admiral James Whittaker, Naval Special Warfare Command. I've traveled here from Virginia Beach to address a situation that has arisen involving one of my former officers. I understand there have been allegations of stolen valor made against Sarah Mitchell. I'm here to set the record straight." Rick Donovan shifted in his seat, but said nothing. "Before I continue," Whittaker said, "I need everyone in this room to understand that what I'm about to tell you is classified information that is being declassified as we speak through special authorization from the Department of Defense. The reason for this declassification is simple. Ms. Mitchell's service has been called into question by people who don't have all the facts. That situation is unacceptable and must be corrected." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Sarah Mitchell is a decorated United States Navy SEAL. She served with distinction in some of the most dangerous operations this country has conducted in the past decade. She has earned every right to wear the trident, to call herself a SEAL, and to be recognized for her extraordinary service." The room erupted. Rick Donovan jumped to his feet. "That's impossible," he shouted. "There are no female Navy SEALs. It's never happened." Whittaker's gaze fixed on Rick with the kind of intensity that had made hardened warriors think twice about crossing him. "Mr. Donovan, I will ask you to sit down and remain quiet until I'm finished. What I'm telling you is the truth, whether it fits your understanding of the world or not." Rick hesitated, then slowly sat back down, his face red with anger and confusion. Whittaker continued. "In 2018, the United States Navy initiated a classified pilot program to assess the viability of female operators in naval special warfare. The program was conducted under strict secrecy for several reasons: to protect the participants from undue scrutiny and harassment, to maintain operational security, and to ensure that standards were not compromised in any way." He pulled a folder from his briefcase and held it up. "This folder contains Sarah Mitchell's service record, now partially declassified for the purposes of today's meeting. I'll summarize the highlights, But I want to be clear. Even with declassification, there are details of her missions that I cannot and will not share. Those operations are still classified at the highest levels. Whitaker opened the folder. Sarah Mitchell enlisted in the Navy at age 21. She excelled in every training program she entered. When the opportunity came to apply for the pilot program, she was one of 12 women selected from across all branches of the military. The selection process alone lasted 6 months and was designed to identify candidates who had the physical capability, mental resilience, and psychological profile necessary for special operations. He flipped a page. Of those 12 women, only 2 successfully completed basic underwater demolition SEAL training. Bud S. Sarah Mitchell was one of them. She then went on to complete SEAL qualification training, advanced tactical training, and specialized courses in multiple disciplines. By every measurable standard, she met or exceeded the requirements expected of any SEAL operator. Sarah sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She had never wanted this, her service laid bare in front of a room full of strangers. But she also knew that Whitaker was doing what he thought was necessary to protect her. Over the next 5 years, Whitaker continued, Commander Mitchell participated in classified operations in Yemen, Somalia, Afghanistan, and other locations I cannot name. She received multiple commendations for valor, including a Navy Cross for actions during a hostage rescue operation where she personally saved the lives of 3 teammates while wounded. Mayor Henderson spoke up, her voice quiet with awe. A Navy Cross? That's the second highest military decoration, isn't it? It is, Whitaker confirmed. It's awarded for extraordinary heroism in combat. Sarah earned it by placing herself between her wounded teammates and enemy fire for over 40 minutes, holding off an assault until reinforcements could arrive. She took 2 bullets in the process and still managed to provide covering fire that allowed her team to extract safely. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, remembering that night. The pain, the fear, the certainty that she was going to die in that compound, but also the clarity of purpose, the knowledge that her teammates depended on her. Sarah's military career ended when an IED explosion during a mission in 2023 caused severe injuries to her leg and resulted in the loss of several members of her team. After months of recovery, she was medically retired with full honors. However, due to the classified nature of her service, those honors could not be made public. She was advised to maintain a low profile and to avoid discussing her military background. Whitaker closed the folder and looked directly at Rick Donovan. So, Mr. Donovan, when you accused Sarah Mitchell of stolen valor, you were not only wrong, you were insulting a genuine American hero. A woman who has given more for this country than most people can imagine. A woman who earned every decoration, every honor, every right to wear the uniform and insignia of a Navy SEAL. The room was silent. Rick Donovan's face had gone from red to pale. He opened his mouth several times, but seemed unable to find words. Whitaker wasn't finished. I understand your passion for protecting military valor, Mr. Donovan. That instinct is commendable, but your assumptions were based on incomplete information. You assumed that because you had never heard of female Navy SEALs, they must not exist. That assumption led you to publicly humiliate a decorated veteran who has already sacrificed more than you know. Rick finally found his voice. I didn't know. How could I know? This was all secret. You couldn't have known, Whitaker agreed. Which is precisely why you should have been more careful about making accusations. Stolen valor is a real problem, but so is rushing to judgment without facts. He turned to address the entire room. The reason I've come here personally, the reason I've pushed for partial declassification of Commander Mitchell's record, is because I will not allow her service to be questioned or diminished. She and the other women in that pilot program faced obstacles that most male SEALs never had to consider. They faced doubts from within the military, skepticism from their peers, and the constant pressure of knowing that their performance would be used to judge the capabilities of all women in special operations. Sarah felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. She had not cried during Bud S., had not cried during her injuries, and she would not cry now. Sarah Mitchell exceeded every expectation, Whitaker said, his voice carrying a note of pride. She proved that courage, skill, and dedication are not limited by gender. She earned the respect of every man she served with, and she deserves the respect of this community. He paused, then added, I should also mention that Sarah has a very distinctive tattoo on her left shoulder. It's the seal trident, but with a unique addition that was authorized specifically for the members of the pilot program. The tattoo includes a small Latin phrase, Factis non verbis, by deeds, not words. Every member of that program who earned their trident received the same tattoo as a mark of their achievement. Sarah's hand unconsciously moved toward her left shoulder. The tattoo was usually hidden beneath her clothing, but it was there, a permanent reminder of who she had been, what she had done. Whitaker looked at her. Sarah, would you mind showing everyone? I think it would help make this real for them. Sarah hesitated for only a moment before standing and removing her jacket. She wore a simple tank top underneath. She turned slightly, revealing her left shoulder and the intricate trident tattoo with its motto scripted beneath. Several people in the room stood to get a better look. Officer Bradley stepped closer, his eyes widening as he saw the detail, the artistry, the obvious significance of the design. That's beautiful, Mayor Henderson said softly, and powerful. Sarah put her jacket back on and sat down, feeling exposed and vulnerable in a way that combat had never made her feel. Whitaker addressed the room again. I'm sharing this information with all of you because Sarah Mitchell is part of your community now. She chose Anchor Bay as a place to heal, to find some peace after years of war. Instead, she found herself accused and questioned. That ends today. I expect that everyone in this room will treat her with the respect she has earned. Is that clear? Everyone nodded, even Rick Donovan, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Good, Whitaker said. Now are there any questions? Mayor Henderson raised her hand. Admiral, why was this program kept secret for so long? Why couldn't the public know about these women and what they achieved? Whitaker sighed. That's a complicated question with no simple answer. Part of it was operational security. We didn't want our enemies to have information about our special operations personnel. Part of it was political. There were and still are people in the military and in government who don't believe women should be in combat roles, especially not in elite units like the SEALs. The program was kept classified to protect it from being shut down before it could prove its worth. And has it proven its worth? The mayor asked. Without question, Whitaker replied. The women who completed that program have served with honor and distinction. They've proven that the only thing that matters in special operations is capability, not gender. Rick Donovan stood up slowly. He looked at Sarah, his earlier defiance completely gone. Ma'am, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I owe you an apology, a big one. I was wrong. I was completely, totally wrong. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for doubting you, for accusing you, for humiliating you in front of the whole town. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. She could see that his apology was genuine, that he was truly remorseful. Part of her wanted to hold on to her anger, to make him feel the sting of his mistake. But she had learned in her years of service that holding onto anger only hurt yourself in the end. Apology accepted, she said quietly. You didn't have all the information. You were trying to protect something you believe in. I understand that. Rick shook his head. That's generous of you, more generous than I deserve. He paused, then added, For what it's worth, I'd like to buy you a drink sometime. I'd like to hear your stories if you're ever willing to share them. I think I have a lot to learn. Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a small loosening of the knot that had been there since yesterday. Maybe someday, she said, when I'm ready. The meeting concluded shortly after. People filed out, many of them stopping to shake Sarah's hand or thank her for her service. Officer Bradley apologized again, though Sarah told him he had nothing to apologize for. He had just been doing his job. Finally, only Sarah and Admiral Whitaker remained in the conference room. How are you holding up? He asked gently. I don't know, Sarah admitted. This isn't what I wanted. I didn't want any attention. I didn't want my service to become public. I know, Whitaker said. But sometimes we don't get to choose how our stories are told. What matters is that the truth is out now. You don't have to hide anymore. You don't have to pretend to be someone you're not. I'm not sure I know who I am anymore, Sarah said quietly. I was a SEAL. That was my identity for so long. And now I'm just a disabled veteran trying to figure out what comes next. Whitaker put a hand on her shoulder. Sarah, you're one of the finest officers I've ever had the privilege of commanding. Your service may have ended, but your value as a person, your strength, your character, none of that ended. You have a whole life ahead of you, and now you can live it without having to hide. Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. There's one more thing, Whitaker said. The Navy is planning a ceremony in 3 months. They're going to publicly recognize the members of the pilot program. Your name will be there, along with your commendations. It's going to be a big deal. The Secretary of the Navy will be there, probably some members of Congress. The program is being officially acknowledged, and the women who served in it are going to get the recognition they deserve. Sarah's first instinct was to refuse, to say she didn't want to be part of any ceremony. But then she thought about the other women who had been in the program with her, the ones who hadn't made it through Bud S, but who had tried just as hard. She thought about the ones who had served alongside her in the field and were still serving in classified roles. They deserved to have their story told. I'll be there, she said. Whitaker smiled. Good, now I need to catch a flight back. But Sarah, take care of yourself. You've earned the right to some peace and happiness. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise. They shook hands, and Sarah watched him leave. Then she stood alone in the empty conference room, feeling the weight of the past 2 days settling over her like a heavy blanket. Her secret was out. The life she had tried to build in anonymity was over. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing after all. Part 4. The Reckoning. The days following Admiral Whitaker's visit brought changes to Anchor Bay that Sarah hadn't anticipated. News of her service spread through the town, but not in the way she had feared. Instead of skepticism or judgment, she found herself receiving respect, gratitude, and a level of interest in her story that made her deeply uncomfortable. The local newspaper ran a front-page story, carefully avoiding any classified details, but celebrating the revelation that a genuine Navy SEAL hero lived among them. The article quoted Admiral Whitaker extensively and included a respectful profile of Sarah's public service record. What surprised Sarah most was Rick Donovan's response. 3 days after the meeting at the police station, he published a long post on social media, the same platform where he had initially accused her of stolen valor. This time, his message was very different. I was wrong, his post began. I made assumptions based on incomplete information. I publicly accused Sarah Mitchell of stolen valor when, in fact, she is a genuine American hero who has sacrificed more for our country than I ever knew. I owe her an apology, which I have given privately, but I also owe the truth to everyone who saw my original post. Sarah Mitchell earned her Navy SEAL trident through blood, sweat, and tears. She served in classified operations that protected our freedom. She was wounded in combat defending her teammates. I was not only wrong to accuse her, I was deeply, shamefully wrong. To Sarah Mitchell, thank you for your service, and please forgive me for my ignorance and rush to judgment. The post was shared hundreds of times. Many people commented with their own apologies for believing the original accusations. Others shared messages of support for Sarah. A few, inevitably, questioned whether a woman could really be a Navy SEAL, but those voices were quickly drowned out by defenders who cited Admiral Whitaker's statements. Sarah read Rick's post in her apartment, her emotions complicated. She appreciated the apology, the willingness to admit error publicly. But she also felt exposed in a way that made her skin crawl. The attention, the scrutiny, the sudden transformation from anonymous resident to local celebrity, it was exactly what she had been trying to avoid. On Friday, 5 days after the confrontation at the diner, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. She was sitting on the small balcony of her apartment, drinking coffee and watching the morning fog roll in from the ocean, when there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find a woman in her late 20s standing in the hallway. She was tall, athletic, with short dark hair and intelligent brown eyes. She wore jeans and a simple gray hoodie, but something about the way she carried herself suggested military training. "Sarah Mitchell?" the woman asked. "Yes," Sarah replied cautiously. The woman extended her hand. "My name is Lieutenant Jessica Chen. I'm Navy, assigned to Naval Special Warfare Command. May I come in?" Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside. "Of course." Once inside, Jessica looked around the modest apartment before turning to face Sarah. "I wanted to meet you in person. I've read your file, the declassified portions anyway. What you accomplished is remarkable." "Thank you," Sarah said, unsure where this was going. "But I'm retired now, if the Navy needs something from me." "This isn't official business," Jessica interrupted gently. "I'm here because I'm part of the second class of the program, the pilot program you helped pioneer." Sarah felt her breath catch. "You're a SEAL trainee, yes," Jessica confirmed. "I'm currently in advanced training. I'll graduate in 2 months if everything goes according to plan. There are 4 of us in this class, all women. We're following the path you helped create." Sarah gestured for Jessica to sit, then took a seat across from her. "How did you find me?" "Admiral Whittaker told me where you were living. He thought I should meet you, talk to you. He said you might need to know that what you did mattered, that it led to something bigger." Sarah absorbed this. 4 women in your class made it through Bud S. "4 so far," Jessica said. "And there's a 3rd class starting next month with 6 female candidates. The program isn't classified anymore. Well, not completely. They announced it 6 months ago, quietly. The pilot program proved that women could meet the standards. Now it's becoming part of the regular SEAL training pipeline." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Sarah, you and the other women in that 1st class changed everything. You dealt with skepticism from instructors, harassment from some of your fellow candidates, and the pressure of knowing that if you failed, it might close the door for all women. But you didn't fail. You succeeded. And because of that, women like me have opportunities we never would have had." Sarah felt emotions welling up that she had kept locked away for months. "I didn't do it to be a pioneer," she said quietly. "I did it because I wanted to serve at the highest level. I wanted to test myself against the toughest challenges." "I know," Jessica said. "I read the psychological evaluations in your file. You weren't trying to make a political statement or prove a point about gender equality. You just wanted to be a SEAL, but intention doesn't change impact. You made a difference whether you meant to or not." Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. "Do they still give you trouble, the men in your class?" "Some of them," Jessica admitted. "Not most. Most of them judge you on performance, same as they would judge any candidate. But there are always a few who resent our presence, who think we don't belong there. We deal with it the same way you did, by being better, by refusing to quit, by earning their respect through our actions." "By deeds, not words," Sarah said softly, unconsciously touching her left shoulder where her tattoo lay hidden beneath her shirt. "Exactly," Jessica said. She stood and walked to stand beside Sarah at the window. "The reason I really came here, beyond just meeting you, was to tell you something important. What happened to you this week? The accusation, the public revelation of your service, it's going to happen to all of us eventually. The program isn't fully classified anymore, but our specific identities, our assignments, they're still protected. Sooner or later, though, we're all going to have to navigate between our desire for privacy and the reality that we represent something bigger than ourselves." Sarah turned to look at her. "How are you handling it?" "I'm not sure yet," Jessica admitted. "I haven't faced my moment of truth, but watching how you handled yours with dignity, with restraint, with grace under pressure, that gave me a template. When my time comes, I hope I can do half as well as you did." They talked for another hour, sharing experiences, comparing notes on training, discussing the unique challenges of being a woman in a world designed for men. Jessica told Sarah about the improvements that had been made to the program based on lessons learned from the pilot class. Sarah told Jessica about some of the missions she could discuss, the lessons she had learned about leadership and teamwork under fire. When Jessica finally left, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of connection, of purpose beyond her own isolated struggle. She had spent so long thinking of herself as a failed soldier, someone whose career had ended too soon, whose service was locked away in classified files. But talking to Jessica made her realize that her service had meaning beyond the missions she had run. It had opened a door that others were now walking through. That afternoon, Sarah decided to take a walk through downtown Anchor Bay. It was the first time she had ventured out since the revelation of her service became public knowledge. She half expected to be mobbed by curious townspeople or subjected to awkward conversations with strangers who wanted to thank her for her service. What actually happened was more subtle and, in its own way, more meaningful. Old Mrs. Patterson, who ran the bookstore on Main Street, simply nodded respectfully when Sarah walked by. No effusive thanks, no barrage of questions, just a quiet acknowledgement from one person to another. The owner of the hardware store, a Vietnam veteran named Bob Chen, caught her eye and gave her a slight salute, not the formal military salute, but the casual gesture of recognition that veterans often share. At the grocery store, the teenage cashier seemed starstruck, but was too shy to say anything beyond, "Thank you for shopping with us." It was, Sarah realized, exactly the kind of respect she could live with. Not worship, not celebrity treatment, just simple recognition of her service and then a return to normal life. As she walked back toward her apartment, she passed the Anchor Bay diner. Through the window, she could see Rick Donovan sitting at the counter. He noticed her at the same moment and immediately stood up, coming outside. "Sarah," he said, his voice uncertain. "I'm glad I ran into you. I've been wanting to talk to you, but I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me." "It's okay, Rick," Sarah said. "We're past it." "Are we?" he asked. "Because I'm not sure I'm past it. I keep thinking about what I did, how quickly I jumped to conclusions. It's been eating at me." Sarah studied him. The arrogance she had seen in the diner a week ago was gone, replaced by genuine remorse and self-reflection. "You made a mistake," she said, "but you owned it publicly and completely. That takes courage. In my experience, the measure of a person isn't whether they make mistakes, everyone does. It's what they do after the mistake that matters." Rick nodded slowly. "I appreciate you saying that. I also wanted to tell you something. My son, the one I mentioned who's active duty Navy, I called him and told him what happened. He looked into the pilot program, read some of the recently declassified information. You know what he said." "What?" Sarah asked. "He said you're a legend. He said people in the special operations community talk about you and the other women in that first class with respect bordering on awe. He said that what you accomplished has made the entire Navy better." Sarah felt her throat tighten. That's kind of him to say. "It's not kindness, it's truth," Rick said. "Look, I know you came here for privacy, for peace. And I know the last thing you probably want is more attention. But the town council is meeting tonight, and they want to do something to honor you. Nothing big, nothing that would make you uncomfortable. Just a formal apology from the town for what happened and maybe a small ceremony recognizing your service. Would you consider it?" Sarah's first instinct was to refuse. She didn't want ceremonies, didn't want to be put on display. But then she thought about what Admiral Whittaker had said about not hiding anymore. She thought about Jessica Chen and the other women following in her footsteps. Maybe acceptance, rather than avoidance, was the path forward. "What kind of ceremony?" she asked cautiously. "Just a town council meeting where we formally recognize your service," Rick explained. "Mayor Henderson would say a few words, maybe present you with a proclamation or something. It would be public, but low-key. And it would send a message to everyone in Anchor Bay that you're a valued member of this community." Sarah considered it. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Rick said. "The meeting isn't for a week. Take your time. And Sarah, thank you, for your service obviously, but also for giving me a chance to make this right." That evening, Sarah sat on her balcony as the sun set over the ocean, thinking about Rick's offer and about the larger question it represented. What kind of life did she want to build now that her secret was out? For months, she had defined herself by what she had lost, her career, her team, her sense of purpose. But maybe that was the wrong way to think about it. Maybe she should focus instead on what she still had, her skills, her experience, her ability to make a difference. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed a Virginia number she didn't recognize. "Hello," she answered. "Sarah Mitchell, this is Colonel Robert Hayes, Army Special Operations. I got your number from Admiral Whittaker. I hope you don't mind the intrusion." "Not at all," Sarah said, curious. "What can I do for you, Colonel?" "I'm calling because I run a program that trains special operations personnel in advanced tactical skills. We're always looking for instructors who have real-world experience and the ability to teach. Admiral Whittaker suggested you might be interested." Sarah sat up straighter. "An instructor position." "That's right," Hayes confirmed. "It would be based at Fort Bragg, though there's some travel involved. The pay is good, and you'd be working with some of the best operators in the military. More importantly, you'd be passing on your knowledge and experience to the next generation. Whittaker tells me you're one of the best tactical minds he's ever worked with. We could use someone like you." Sarah's mind raced. An opportunity to serve again, to be useful, to share what she had learned in the field. It would mean leaving Anchor Bay, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. The town knew her story now. She could leave with her head held high, knowing that she had nothing to hide. "I'm very interested," Sarah said. "Can you send me more information?" "I'll email you everything tonight," Hayes promised. "Take your time reviewing it and let me know if you have any questions. I think you'd be a great fit for this program, Sarah. We'd be lucky to have you." After the call ended, Sarah sat for a long time, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. For the first time in months, she felt something that had been missing. Hope. Hope that her service wasn't over, just transformed. Hope that she could still make a difference, still use her skills and experience for something meaningful. The past week had been difficult, forcing her to confront her desire for anonymity and accept the reality of who she was. But maybe that confrontation had been necessary. Maybe she needed to stop hiding from her past and start embracing it as a foundation for her future. Tomorrow, she would call Rick Donovan and tell him she would attend the town council meeting. She would accept Anchor Bay's recognition with grace and gratitude. And then, when the time was right, she would move on to the next chapter of her life, whatever that might be. For the first time since her injury, since her discharge, since her arrival in this small coastal town, Sarah Mitchell felt like she knew who she was again. Not just a former SEAL, not just a disabled veteran, but a woman who had served with honor, who had nothing to be ashamed of, and who still had much to offer the world. Part 5, By Deeds Not Words. The town council chamber of Anchor Bay was a modest room in the municipal building, with rows of folding chairs facing a raised platform where the council members sat. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, wearing dark slacks and a simple blue blazer, professional but not showy. She wanted to show respect for the occasion without appearing to seek attention. She was surprised to find the room already half full. Mayor Henderson greeted her at the door with a warm handshake. "Thank you for coming, Sarah," the mayor said. "I know this isn't easy for you, but I think you'll find that this community wants to do right by you." Sarah nodded, taking a seat in the front row as the mayor had instructed. Over the next few minutes, the room continued to fill. She recognized faces from around town, the bookstore owner, the grocery store manager, several people she had seen at the diner. Officer Bradley sat near the back, along with several other police officers. And there, in the third row, was Rick Donovan with his wife and his friend Pete. At exactly 7 o'clock, Mayor Henderson called the meeting to order. After a brief review of routine town business, she paused and looked directly at Sarah. "Before we continue with our regular agenda," the mayor said, "we have an important matter to address. Last week, our town was the site of an unfortunate incident involving one of our residents, Sarah Mitchell. I think most of you have heard the story by now, but for the record, I want to state the facts clearly." She took a breath before continuing. "Sarah Mitchell is a retired Navy SEAL commander who served our country with extraordinary distinction in classified operations around the world. She received numerous commendations for valor, including the Navy Cross for heroism in combat. She was wounded in action while protecting her teammates. She has earned every honor, every recognition, and every ounce of respect that we can offer." The mayor paused as scattered applause broke out in the audience. However, when Sarah first arrived in our town, she chose to keep her military service private. This was not out of shame or deception, but because the nature of her service required discretion. Classified operations, by their very nature, cannot be publicly acknowledged. Sarah was following protocols designed to protect both her and the missions she participated in. Mayor Henderson's expression grew more serious. Unfortunately, one of our residents, acting on incomplete information, accused Sarah of what's known as stolen valor, falsely claiming military service or decorations. This accusation was made publicly and led to Sarah being questioned by our police department. The accusation was entirely false, but it caused Sarah significant distress and embarrassment. Rick Donovan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The purpose of tonight's proceedings, the mayor continued, is threefold. First, to offer Sarah a formal apology on behalf of the town of Anchor Bay. Second, to publicly recognize her service and sacrifice. And third, to ensure that nothing like this happens again to any veteran in our community. She picked up a framed document from the table beside her. Sarah, would you please come up here? Sarah stood and walked to the platform, very aware of every eye in the room watching her. The mayor smiled warmly and handed her the document. This is a proclamation from the Anchor Bay Town Council, Mayor Henderson said, formally recognizing your service to our nation and apologizing for the treatment you received. I'd like to read it aloud. She took the document back and began reading. Whereas Sarah Mitchell served the United States of America as a Navy SEAL with extraordinary courage and dedication. And whereas Sarah Mitchell participated in classified operations that protected American lives and advanced American interests around the world. And whereas Sarah Mitchell was wounded in combat while displaying selfless heroism in defense of her teammates. And whereas Sarah Mitchell chose to make Anchor Bay her home following her honorable military retirement. And whereas Sarah Mitchell was wrongfully accused of stolen valor by a resident of our town. And whereas this accusation caused Sarah Mitchell to be subjected to unwarranted scrutiny and public embarrassment. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Anchor Bay Town Council formally apologizes to Sarah Mitchell for the treatment she received. And be it further resolved that the Town Council recognizes and honors Sarah Mitchell's exemplary service to our nation. And be it further resolved that Sarah Mitchell be declared an honored citizen of Anchor Bay, with our community's deepest gratitude and respect. The room erupted in applause. Sarah stood holding the proclamation, feeling a strange mixture of embarrassment and gratitude. This was not the kind of recognition she had ever sought, but standing here, seeing the genuine respect and appreciation in the faces around her, she found she could accept it. When the applause died down, Mayor Henderson spoke again. I'd also like to invite Rick Donovan to come forward. Rick stood slowly and walked to the platform. His face was pale, and Sarah could see his hands trembling slightly. He stood before Sarah, took a deep breath, and spoke. Sarah, I'm the one who accused you. I'm the one who called you a liar in public. I'm the one who called the police and insisted they investigate you for stolen valor. And I was wrong. Completely, utterly, shamefully wrong. His voice cracked slightly. I thought I was protecting something important, the integrity of military service, the honor of people who wore the uniform. But what I actually did was attack someone who had served with more courage and distinction than I can comprehend. I humiliated a genuine hero based on my own ignorance and assumptions. He paused, gathering himself. I've apologized to you privately, Sarah, but I needed to apologize publicly too, in front of everyone who heard my accusations. You didn't deserve what I did to you. You deserved respect, gratitude, and privacy. Instead, I gave you suspicion and judgment. I'm deeply sorry. Sarah looked at Rick for a long moment. She could see that his remorse was genuine, that this public apology was costing him something. It would have been easy for him to let the mayor's words be enough, to hide in the general apology from the town. Instead, he had chosen to stand here, to face her directly, to own his mistake completely. Thank you, Rick, Sarah said quietly. I accept your apology. What happened wasn't easy, but I think we both learned something from it. Rick nodded gratefully and returned to his seat. Mayor Henderson turned to Sarah. Would you like to say anything to the council or the community? Sarah hadn't prepared any remarks. She had assumed she would simply accept the proclamation and sit down. But looking out at the faces in the audience, she felt compelled to speak. When I came to Anchor Bay, she began, her voice steady, I was trying to leave my military service behind me. I thought that if I could just be anonymous, just be ordinary, I could find some peace. I was tired of being defined by what I had done, by the missions I had run, by the things I had seen. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But what happened last week taught me something important. You can't run from who you are. You can't hide from your own history. My service as a Navy SEAL is part of me, whether I talk about it or not. It shaped me, changed me, made me who I am today. She looked directly at Rick Donovan. When Rick accused me, I was angry. I felt betrayed, exposed, violated. But now, with some distance, I understand why he did it. Stolen valor is real. There are people who do fake military service for attention or benefits. Rick was trying to protect something important. He was trying to honor the sacrifices that real veterans make. His methods were wrong, but his intentions came from a good place. She turned back to the full audience. I also want to say something about the program I was part of. The classified pilot program for female Navy SEALs wasn't created to make a political statement. It was created because some leaders in the military believed that capability matters more than gender. They believed that if women could meet the standards, the exact same standards as men, then they should have the opportunity to serve in any role. Sarah felt her voice growing stronger. I didn't join that program to prove anything about women in general. I joined because I wanted to test myself against the hardest challenges the military could offer. But whether I intended it or not, my service did prove something. It proved that women can be Navy SEALs. Not all women, just like not all men can be SEALs. But some women, the right women, with the right training and the right support, can meet those standards and serve with honor. She smiled slightly. A few days ago, I met a woman who's currently in SEAL training. She's part of the second class of women to go through the program. She told me that what the first class accomplished opened doors for her and others like her. That made me realize that even though my time as an active duty SEAL is over, my service still matters. It still has meaning and purpose. Sarah took a breath. So I want to thank the people of Anchor Bay for your apology, for your recognition, and for your respect. But more than that, I want to thank you for this opportunity to remember why I served in the first place. I served because I love this country. I served because I believe in protecting people who can't protect themselves. I served because I wanted to make a difference. She looked down at the proclamation in her hands. My tattoo says, Factis non verbis, by deeds, not words. That's been my guiding principle throughout my military career. What I did mattered more than what I said. My actions spoke louder than any proclamation or recognition ever could. She raised her eyes to the audience again. So while I appreciate this honor, what I appreciate even more is the chance to move forward with my head held high, to stop hiding from who I am, to embrace my service and use my experience to help others. I've been offered a position as an instructor for special operations personnel. I'm going to take it. I'm going to teach the next generation of warriors what I learned in the field, and hopefully, I'll help prepare them for the challenges they'll face. Spontaneous applause broke out again. Sarah waited for it to die down before continuing. To everyone here who has served in the military, thank you for your service. To everyone who supports veterans, thank you for your respect and gratitude. And to anyone who has ever felt like they had to hide who they are or what they've accomplished, I want you to know you don't. Be proud of what you've done. Stand tall. Let your deeds speak for themselves. She nodded to Mayor Henderson. Thank you for this honor. I'll treasure it. The meeting concluded shortly after, but many people stayed to talk to Sarah. Veterans wanted to shake her hand, to share their own stories, to express their admiration. Younger people, especially young women, wanted to know about her experiences, about what it took to become a SEAL, about how to pursue their own challenging goals. Sarah spoke with each person patiently, answering what questions she could, deflecting those that touched on classified matters. She found herself enjoying the interactions more than she had expected. These weren't people trying to worship her or put her on a pedestal. They were simply curious, respectful, interested in her story. Rick Donovan waited until the crowd had thinned before approaching her again. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I meant what I said up there. I'm truly sorry. But I also want you to know something else. What you said about my intentions coming from a good place, that was generous, maybe more generous than I deserve. But it also made me think about something." "What's that?" Sarah asked. "I've been wrapped up in my own identity as a veteran for so long that I forgot what service actually means," Rick said. "It's not about wearing the uniform or displaying the patches or making sure everyone knows what you did. It's about the actual work, the actual sacrifice. You lived that. I just talked about it." He extended his hand. "I'd be honored if you'd let me buy you that drink I mentioned. Not to hear war stories or to make myself feel better about what happened, but just to talk, person to person. I think I could learn a lot from you." Sarah shook his hand. "I'd like that. After I get settled in my new position, after things calm down a bit, let's make it happen." Rick smiled with genuine warmth. "Deal." As Sarah finally left the municipal building and walked out into the cool November night, she felt lighter than she had in months. The weight of secrecy, of hiding, of constantly watching her words, it was gone. She could be herself now, fully and completely. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Admiral Whittaker. "Heard about the town council meeting. Well done, Commander. Always knew you'd figure out how to navigate these waters. Proud of you. JW." Sarah smiled and texted back, "Thank you, sir, for everything." Over the next few weeks, Sarah prepared for her move to Fort Bragg and her new position as an instructor. She sold most of her furniture, packed up her modest belongings, and said goodbye to the few people in Anchor Bay she had gotten to know. The night before she left, she had dinner at the Anchor Bay diner, the scene of the original confrontation. The waitress who had witnessed everything greeted her with a smile. "Heard you're leaving us," she said. "Town won't be the same without you." "I think the town will be just fine," Sarah replied. "But thank you." As she ate, Sarah reflected on her time in Anchor Bay. She had come here broken, hiding, trying to escape her past. She was leaving whole, acknowledged, ready to embrace her future. The journey hadn't been easy or comfortable, but it had been necessary. Her phone rang. It was Jessica Chen, the SEAL trainee she had met weeks earlier. "Sarah, I wanted to catch you before you headed to Fort Bragg," Jessica said. "I just got my orders. I'll be stationed at Dam Neck for my first assignment. I graduate next week." "Congratulations," Sarah said, genuine pride in her voice. "You did it." "We did it," Jessica corrected. "All of us. You, me, the women in the next class, everyone who came before and everyone who'll come after. We're proving that the only thing that matters is capability." "By deeds, not words," Sarah said softly. "Exactly," Jessica agreed. "Hey, I heard about your new position, training the next generation. That's perfect for you. You're going to be amazing at it." "I hope so," Sarah said. "It feels right, like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be." After the call ended, Sarah finished her meal and walked back to her apartment one last time. Tomorrow, she would drive to Fort Bragg and begin the next chapter of her life. She would teach young operators the lessons she had learned in the field. She would share her experience, her knowledge, her hard-won wisdom. But tonight, she stood on her balcony and looked out at the ocean, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The training, the missions, the sacrifices, the injuries, the losses, the dark nights when she wondered if any of it mattered. It did matter, every bit of it, not because of awards or recognition or proclamations, but because she had served with honor, had protected her teammates, had done what needed to be done when it needed to be done. Sarah touched her left shoulder, feeling the outline of her tattoo through her shirt. The sealed trident with its motto, "By deeds, not words." That was the only truth that mattered. That was the legacy she would carry forward, not the medals locked away in classified files, not the missions whose details would never be publicly known, but the simple fact that when her country had called, she had answered. When her teammates had needed her, she had been there. When the moment required courage, she had found it. The rest was just noise. As the stars emerged above the Atlantic Ocean, Sarah Mitchell, Navy SEAL, warrior, instructor, survivor, smiled. She had nothing left to prove and everything left to give. And that, she realized, was exactly how it should be.